Greetings. We now move away from the introductory material and we move to our first country, Great Britain. I have a lot of interest in this country for a whole bunch of reasons. Academically, this is the most copied model in the world, the parliamentary model that was initiated by the British. I have a personal interest in Britain because one side of my family comes from Britain. I have my British family traced back to 1422, which is the farthest I have any of my family trees traced back. When we get to France, I have a branch of my tree that comes from Marseille in southern France. I have a Sicilian side in Italy. I have a German side. So, one of the reasons I'm obviously interested in European politics is that I am Europe. And I'll talk about that a little bit. The title for this first page is British Historical Political Development / Geography. And I began this section with a quote, Britain, a country with only its past to live for. I stole this quote from John Foles, and he meant it as a criticism of the British system. However, in my case, I see this as an endorsement of history. One of the reasons that ceremony is found in all branches of government, in really all levels of government, and in fact throughout British society, is that these historical memories of the past, where at one time Britain had the largest colonial empire in the world, until 1850, the British had the largest economy in the world. They had the largest navy in the world. At one time, they were considered the number one military in the world. And so all of these historical memories add both legitimacy, that's a concept that I referred to earlier, and dignity to the British political system. Unlike France, our second country, where I'm going to talk about democracy as taking a revolutionary route, British democracy is the product of 700 years of gradual political evolution. The British model, the British political system, is the oldest continuously operating political system in the world. And the fact that more democratic political systems are influenced by the British political model than any alternative is one of the reasons that before I graduated, when I was in grad school, every professor that taught comparative politics began the course with the British system. Even now, when I once in a while look up a comparative course, people who use the case study or the country by country model of teaching still almost exclusively begin with Britain. Now, Ruskin in chapter 2 begins his discussion of Great Britain by referencing geography. Certainly, if you take a look at Great Britain, obviously it is an island. That certainly tends to give it more insularity. We'll talk about that. Ruskin doesn't talk so much about the natural resources that Britain was sitting on. For example, Britain was sitting on a huge mound of coal, which helped catapult the Industrial Revolution. Certainly, overall, there's no question that geography is a plus. He contrasts right at the start of chapter 2. He points out that some countries are cursed by geography and uses the country of Poland as an example. When I used to teach international relations, my nickname for Poland was that Poland is the Thanksgiving turkey of international relations, wedged between a variety of countries, but Germany on one side and Russia on the other. If you look at a historical atlas of the world, you will see Poland appear and disappear and to change into various shapes over time. Britain is very different than that. Unlike the Poles, who often had to create governments under the pressure of military defeat, or in some cases simply become consumed by a great power and just disappear from the map. The English people, for nearly 1,000 years, have not had to sit down under the pressure of military defeat to create a new political system. Every other great European power, as of 1900, France, Germany, Italy, Russia, etc., all of them had to create a new government after a military defeat. And let me give you an example that I don't have written down in the notes, but I will give you later when we get to France. France has had 5 republics since the French Revolution in 1789. So over the last 230 years, the French have attempted democracy 5 times. 4 of those systems have failed, and only the current Fifth Republic has survived. And it's only survived about 60 years. If you take a look at the Third Republic in France, which is the longest lasting democracy in French history, the Third Republic was created in 1870 after France was defeated in the Franco-Prussian War. After that war, they gave up their monarchy, and so because of military defeat, the French were forced to create a new government called the Third Republic. The Third Republic ended in France after France was defeated in warfare when the Nazis invaded France in 1940 and the French surrendered. That was the end of the Third Republic. So the Third Republic in France was created by warfare, by military defeat, and the Third Republic ended because of military defeat. And so when we get to France, we're going to talk about these zigzags, as I will call them. Right? In France, you go from military strongmen, whether it is someone like Napoleon or Marshal Pétain or Napoleon Bonaparte, right? Or whether we have a monarch like Louis Napoleon, for example, or the Orleanist monarchy, or republics. The country swings between extremes, between conservatives who want executive dominance and liberals who want equity and legislative dominance. In Britain, we don't have this political instability. The English are allowed to very slowly and very gradually create their own political system without outside interference. Now, I would add a little bit to Roskin here. It isn't that geography is only an advantage or only a disadvantage. There's no question that geography was kind to Britain as well as to the United States. It's also fair to say that geography cursed Poland, as Roskin points out. But some countries have a more mixed geographical legacy. France has a mild climate, a rich soil, rivers that flow deep into the country that make navigation easy. Because of the mild climate, the rich soil, even today, France is the second largest food exporter in the world. However, because of geography, when France has been strong, they've been able to expand. And certainly you can look at Napoleon's bid to take over Europe that was unsuccessful. But when we think about France in the last 100 years, we think about a country that was vulnerable to invasions by Nazi Germany in both world wars. Russia has a very, very, very mixed geographical legacy. On the positive side, geographically, Russia is a massive country. It is the largest country in the world. This has made the country nearly impossible to conquer, as both Napoleon and Hitler found out. I often refer to the Russian winner as the great generals in Russian history. In fact, I will often refer in international relations to the great Russian generals December and January, which both froze invading armies. On the other hand, the cold weather has resulted in short growing seasons, and so sometimes crop yields have not been good. Some of the best resources in Russia are buried in Siberia, where the weather is very inhospitable. The weather makes it very difficult to extract these natural resources. And so Russian geography is mixed. For me, the United States is blessed with natural resources, non-threatening neighbors, two giant oceans that have served as buffers from Europe. And there's no question in my mind that geography has been very, very kind to the United States. For Britain, geography has also been a blessing, and so certainly I agree with Roskin. The way that I would put it is geography has protected the country from being the battleground of Europe. Certainly, as the largest empire in the world, Britain was involved in numerous wars. But notice how the wars that England has fought for centuries have been fought on someone else's soil. Certainly, both world wars were fought on the continent. But even if you go back to early wars, for example, the first massive war that Britain was involved in, the Hundred Years' War in the 14th and 15th centuries, they were fought over holdings in what today is France. Gascony is where the Hundred Years' War began. But the war was fought on and off for 114 years on the continent. And so Britain has not had to write a government under the pressure of military defeat, even though there were numerous invasions before 1066 by the Celts, the Romans, the Angles, the Saxons, the Normans, and others that are mentioned by Roskin early in chapter 2. The point is, over the last 1,000 years, the English Channel has posed a significant barrier that has kept other Europeans from successfully invading and taking over England and forcing England to change its political system. And so this geographic isolation that has been such an advantage to the British has meant politically, and that's what we're interested in this course, is the political significance, is that England developed its own political institutions without foreign interference, which is unlike other great powers on the continent. To use the terms that I introduced you to in the first module, the British have been blessed by having both internal as well as external sovereignty in drafting a political system. And so militarily, this geographic isolation meant that England rarely needed a large army. The crown became dependent on parliament, which meant power sharing, which I'll talk about. The country developed a strong naval tradition that contributed to the creation of a worldwide colonial empire. And take a look at the graphic at the bottom of the page. Last foreign invasion in Britain 1066, France 1940, Germany 1944, Japan 1945. Last internal revolution, Britain 1688, in France, Germany, and Japan the 20th century. The current constitution in Britain, 17th century. Once again, the other three countries, the 20th century.